The night had a quiet way of holding secrets, and on that particular evening, the city felt softer than usual, as if it too was tired of the noise it carried all day. Streetlights flickered like distant stars, and a gentle breeze whispered through the empty roads. Ava stood by her window, her fingers wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. She wasn't really looking outside. Her eyes were fixed on something far beyond the buildings, far beyond the sky, on a feeling she could never quite explain. Loneliness had a strange way of becoming familiar. She had learned to live with it, to sit beside it like an old friend who never leaves. Yet, somewhere deep in her heart, there was still a quiet hope, the kind that refuses to die, even after being ignored for so long. That night something felt different. She didn't know why, but her heart felt restless, as if it was waiting for someone or something. Miles away, in a part of the city that never truly slept, Ethan walked alone through the dimly lit streets. His hands were tucked into his jacket pockets, his steps slow, almost hesitant. He had nowhere specific to go, yet he couldn't bring himself to return home. Home no longer felt like home. It was just a place filled with silence, memories, and things he couldn't fix. Ethan had always been the kind of person who carried everyone else's pain without ever speaking about his own. He smiled when people needed comfort, laughed when others felt low, and stayed strong when everything inside him was breaking. But tonight even he felt tired. Tired of pretending, tired of being strong. He stopped near a small cafe that was about to close. The warm yellow lights inside made the cold night feel even lonelier. For a moment he just stood there, watching strangers finishing their conversations, unaware of the quiet battles others carried. Then, as if guided by something unseen, he stepped inside. At the same time, across the city, Ava found herself doing something unusual. She left her house. Without a clear reason, without a plan, she simply grabbed her coat and walked out into the night. It felt strange, yet comforting, like her heart had made a decision before her mind could question it. The streets led her somewhere she hadn't been in months, the same small cafe. The bell above the door rang softly as she entered, and for a moment time seemed to pause. Ethan looked up. Ava looked around. And in that brief, fragile second their worlds quietly collided. There was nothing dramatic about it. No loud music, no sudden realization. Just two tired souls noticing each other. Ava moved toward a corner table, her steps slow, unsure. Ethan, without understanding why, couldn't take his eyes off her. There was something about her presence, something gentle, something broken, something familiar. As if he had known her in a life he couldn't remember. Minutes passed, yet the silence between them felt louder than words. Finally, as Ava stood to leave, her hand accidentally brushed against the edge of Ethan's table. A soft sound broke the quiet as his cup shifted slightly. "I'm so sorry," she said quickly, her voice soft, almost like a whisper. Ethan shook his head gently. "It's okay." For a moment, neither of them moved. There was something in the air, something unspoken. Ava hesitated, then gave a small, polite smile before turning to leave. But before she could take a step, Ethan spoke again. "Wait," she stopped, not because she had to, but because something in his voice felt different. "Do you ever feel like," he paused, searching for the right words, "like you're surrounded by people but still completely alone?" Ava slowly turned back, her eyes meeting his. And in that moment, something shifted. Because for the first time in a long time, someone had said exactly what she had been feeling. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out at first. Then, almost unknowingly, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. The cafe grew quieter, as if it was listening. Ethan let out a small breath, when he didn't realize he had been holding for years. "I thought I was the only one." Ava walked back and sat across from him, as if her heart had already made the decision. "You're not," she said softly. And just like that, two strangers became something more than strangers. They talked. At first it was simple names, small details, half-smiles, but slowly, gently, the conversation deepened. They spoke about sleepless nights, about dreams they had forgotten, about fears they never shared with anyone else. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel new. It felt familiar, as if their souls had been waiting for this moment. Time passed unnoticed. The cafe owner gave them a polite reminder that it was closing, but neither of them seemed ready to leave. Outside, the night had grown colder, but somehow it didn't feel as heavy anymore. They stepped out together. For a few seconds they just stood there, unsure of what to say next. "Do you believe in coincidence?" Ava asked quietly. Ethan looked at her, a faint smile touching his lips. "I didn't until tonight." Ava's eyes softened. "Maybe," she said, "some meetings aren't random." Ethan nodded. "Maybe they're meant to find us when we're most lost." A gentle silence followed, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable, it was warm. Before leaving, they exchanged numbers, something simple, yet it felt like they had shared something much deeper. As Ava walked away, she turned back once. Ethan was still standing there, watching her. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. And for the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel empty. Neither of them knew what this connection would become. Neither of them understood why it felt so strong. But somewhere deep within their hearts, a quiet hope had begun to grow. The kind that doesn't ask for permission. The kind that changes everything. And that night, without promises, without expectations, a story had quietly begun. The night after they met did not end when they went home. It stayed. It lingered in the quiet corners of their rooms, in the soft rhythm of their breathing, in the thoughts they could not silence. Ava lay on her bed, staring at the ceiling, her phone resting lightly on her chest. She had never been the kind of person to wait for a message. In fact, she used to silence her phone most nights, letting the world exist without her. But tonight was different. Her fingers brushed against the screen more than once, as if her heart was trying to convince her to check even when there was nothing new. "Why does this feel so strange?" she whispered to herself. Not uncomfortable, not confusing, just unfamiliar in the most gentle way. Across the city, Ethan sat by his window the same way he always did when sleep refused to find him. But tonight his silence wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful. His phone rested beside him, the screen lighting up briefly as he picked it up, and then put it down again. He wasn't afraid of talking. He was afraid of ruining something that had just begun. Some connections are so delicate you hesitate to touch them too soon. Minutes turned into hours. The world slept, but their thoughts didn't. Finally, almost at the same time, they both gave in. Ethan typed first. "Did you get home safe?" He stared at the message for a moment before pressing send, as if that small action carried more weight than it should. Ava's phone lit up. Her heart skipped in a way she wasn't used to anymore. She read the message once, then again, and a soft smile found its way to her lips without permission. "Yes, I did you?" There was no delay this time. "Yes, but I think something stayed behind." Ava paused. Her fingers hovered above the screen. "What do you mean?" Ethan looked at his reflection in the window, then back at the message. "I think I left a part of my thoughts at that cafe." Ava's chest tightened, but not in pain, in recognition. "I think I did too." The conversation didn't rush. It unfolded slowly, like a story that wanted to be felt, not just told. They spoke about small things at first, what they usually did at night. How neither of them liked loud places. How silence for both of them had always been more comforting than noise. But slowly, the walls they had built over years began to crack. "Do you always overthink everything?" Ava asked. Ethan smiled faintly. "Only the things that matter. And tonight feels like it matters." Ava didn't reply immediately, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she felt it too. "Me too," she finally wrote. There was something honest about their words. No pretending, no trying to impress, just truth in its simplest form. As the hours passed, their messages became softer, deeper. "Do you ever feel like you care too much?" Ava asked. Ethan's fingers stilled. "Yes," he replied, "and sometimes it feels like a weakness." Ava closed her eyes. "It's not a weakness," she typed slowly. "It just means you feel things more deeply than most people." Ethan read her message twice. No one had ever said it like that before. "Then why does it hurt so much?" Ava took a long breath before replying. "Because not everyone knows how to hold something that fragile." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of understanding. Two people, slowly realizing they weren't alone in the way they felt. Hours passed, but neither of them noticed. The world outside remained quiet, but inside their hearts, something was beginning to awaken. A kind of comfort they had both been searching for without knowing. At some point their messages slowed, not because they ran out of things to say, but because the feeling had settled. "Are you tired?" Ethan asked. "A little," Ava replied. "But I don't want this conversation to end." Ethan's lips curved into a soft smile. "Then let it pause, not end." Ava stared at those words, pause, not end. There was something beautiful about that. "Okay," she wrote, "but promise me something. Anything. Don't disappear tomorrow." Ethan's chest tightened slightly. "I won't." Ava hesitated, then typed one more message. "Good night, Ethan." "Good night, Ava." The messages stopped. But the connection didn't. Ava placed her phone beside her pillow, her eyes finally closing as sleep gently found her. And for the first time in a long time, her dreams didn't feel empty. Across the city, Ethan leaned back in his chair, his eyes drifting shut. And for the first time in years, his thoughts didn't feel heavy. Because somewhere in the quiet of the night, two hearts had found a reason to feel a little less alone. And sometimes, That is where everything truly begins. Morning arrived quietly, as if it didn't want to disturb what the night had created. Sunlight slipped gently through Ava's curtains, resting softly on her face. For a moment she stayed still, her eyes closed, holding onto the warmth of something she couldn't see but could feel. Then it came back to her. The conversation. Ethan. Her eyes opened slowly, and without thinking her hand reached for her phone. There were no new messages, and yet she smiled. Because for the first time she wasn't afraid of silence. She knew it wasn't empty anymore. Across the city, Ethan woke up in a way that felt unfamiliar. Not rushed, not heavy, just calm. He sat up, running a hand through his hair, his gaze falling on his phone resting beside him. For a second he hesitated, then he picked it up. No new messages, but instead of disappointment there was something else. Patience. He leaned back slightly, staring at the ceiling. "Don't rush this," he whispered to himself. "Some things are meant to grow slowly so they can last." Hours passed. Ava tried to focus on her usual routine, but everything felt slightly different. Colors seemed softer, sounds less harsh. Even the silence around her felt kind. She made her tea, sat by the window, and for once she wasn't lost in her thoughts. She was waiting, not anxiously, just gently. Her phone buzzed. Her heart reacted before her mind could. A message. Ethan. "Good morning, I hope your day feels a little lighter today." Ava read the message twice, her lips curving into a quiet smile. She typed slowly, carefully, as if every word mattered. "Good morning." "It already does." Ethan exhaled softly when he saw her reply. He didn't realize how much he had been waiting for it. "How did you sleep?" he asked. Ava looked out the window, sunlight reflecting in her eyes. "Better than I have in a long time." Ethan's fingers paused over the screen. "Me too." There was something simple about their words, but underneath there was depth, understanding, a connection that didn't need to be explained. The conversation continued throughout the day, slipping into the spaces between their routines. They talked about small things again. Favorite books, quiet places they loved, moments from their past that still stayed with them. But slowly, gently, they began to share more, not everything, just enough. "Do you believe people come into our lives for a reason?" Ava asked. Ethan thought for a moment. "I think some people arrive exactly when we need them the most." Ava's heart softened. "And if they leave," Ethan's reply came after a pause, "then maybe they were meant to teach us something before they go." Ava stared at his message. Her fingers tightened slightly around her phone. "I don't want this to be one of those stories," she typed quietly. Ethan read her words, something in his chest shifting. "Neither do I." The honesty between them was growing, not loud, not overwhelming, just real. As the afternoon turned into evening, the sky painted itself in soft shades of orange and gold. Ava found herself walking outside again, not because she had to, but because something inside her wanted to feel the world, now that it didn't seem so heavy. Her phone buzzed. "Where are you?" Ethan asked. She smiled slightly. "Walking." "Alone?" Ava paused. "Yes, but it doesn't feel like it." Ethan looked at her message, a warmth spreading through him. "Can I join you?" Ava stopped walking. Her heart beat a little faster, not from fear, from something softer. "Yes." The word felt simple, but it carried so much meaning. They chose a place without overthinking, the same cafe. It felt right. When Ava arrived, she noticed him immediately. Ethan stood near the entrance, his hands in his pockets, his posture calm but his eyes searching. Until they found her. And in that moment, everything else faded. No noise, no distractions, just two people walking toward each other. Ava felt it again, that quiet pull, that unspoken familiarity. Ethan gave a small smile. "Hi." Ava returned it, softer. "Hi." They didn't rush into conversation this time. They didn't need to. They walked side by side, the evening air cool around them, their steps naturally falling into rhythm. It felt easy, like something they had done before. "So," Ethan said gently, "does it still feel like coincidence?" Ava looked ahead, then at him. "No," she said quietly. "It feels like something I wasn't expecting but needed." Ethan's gaze softened. "Me too." They reached a quiet park nearby, the kind of place where the world seemed to slow down. They sat on a bench, not too close, not too far, just enough space to breathe and to feel. For a while they said nothing. And yet the silence felt full, peaceful, safe. Ava finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's strange." Ethan turned slightly toward her. "What is?" "I don't feel like I have to hide anything around you." Ethan held her words carefully. "Then don't." Ava looked at him, her eyes reflecting something deeper. "I'm not used to that." Ethan's voice softened. "Maybe you just haven't met someone who understands you yet." Ava's heart shifted again. "Maybe." The sky darkened slowly, stars beginning to appear one by one. Time passed unnoticed. Again, before they knew it, the night had wrapped itself around them. "I should go." Ava said quietly. Ethan nodded even though part of him didn't want the moment to end. I'll walk you. They walked back together, the distance feeling shorter than it was. When they reached her street, they stopped. Neither of them spoke immediately, because some moments deserve silence. Today felt, Ava began, searching for the right word. Different, Ethan finished gently. She smiled. Yes, a soft pause followed. Good night, Ava. Good night, Ethan. She turned to leave, then stopped. And for a brief moment she looked back. Ethan was still there, watching, not in a way that felt heavy, but in a way that felt caring. And as she walked inside, one thought stayed with her. Maybe some stories don't begin with loud moments. Maybe they begin quietly, and slowly become everything. The days that followed didn't rush forward. They unfolded slowly, gently, like a story that wanted to be felt in every moment. Ava found herself noticing things she had long stopped paying attention to. The way sunlight moved across her room, the soft sound of evening winds, even silence no longer felt empty, because now it carried something within it. Ethan too, felt the change. His days no longer blended into one another. There was a quiet anticipation in everything he did, a subtle awareness that someone somewhere was thinking of him too. And that feeling, it mattered more than he expected. Their conversations became a part of their routine, not forced. Not planned, just natural, a message in the morning, a thought in the afternoon, a quiet conversation in the night, sometimes long, sometimes just a few words, but always enough. Did you eat? Ava asked one afternoon. Ethan smiled slightly at the message. You always ask that, because you never answer it properly. I did. What did you eat? Ethan paused, then typed, coffee. Ava sighed softly, even though he couldn't hear it. That's not food. It works. No, it doesn't. There was a pause, then another message from Ava. You need to take care of yourself. Ethan stared at the screen a little longer than usual. No one had said that to him in a long time. I will, he replied. Promise. He hesitated, then softly, promise. There was something deeper in that word, not just about food, but about everything, taking care, trying, not giving up, even when it felt easier to. As the evening settled in, Ava found herself waiting again, not impatiently, just knowingly. Her phone buzzed. Are you free? Ethan asked. She smiled. Yes. Can I see you? Her heart responded before her thoughts could. Yes, they met again, not at the cafe this time, somewhere quieter. A place where the city felt distant and the world slowed down, a small rooftop overlooking dim lights and endless sky. Ethan was already there when Ava arrived. He turned as he heard her footsteps, and just like before, everything else faded. You came, he said softly. Ava smiled. You asked. There was something simple about their words, but something deeper in their presence. They stood beside each other, looking out at the city. Lights flickered below like tiny stars, while the real ones shone above them. Do you ever feel like the world is too loud? Ava asked. Ethan nodded. Most of the time. And this, she gestured softly around them. This feels quiet. Ethan glanced at her. It feels safe. Ava's breath slowed slightly. Yes. They moved to sit down, the space between them smaller than before. Not uncomfortable, just closer. Tell me something about you, Ethan said. Ava looked at him. Something real. Only if you want to, she thought for a moment. I'm afraid of losing people. Ethan's expression softened. Why? Because I've experienced it before, she said quietly. And it changes you. Ethan understood more than she said. I know that feeling. Ava looked at him, her eyes searching. What about you? Ethan exhaled slowly. I'm afraid of not being enough. Ava's heart tightened. For who? For anyone who chooses to stay? There was a silence between them, but it wasn't empty. It was heavy with truth. Ava spoke gently. You are enough. Ethan shook his head slightly. It doesn't always feel that way. Ava turned slightly toward him. Maybe you've just been around people who didn't know your worth. Ethan looked at her, really looked. And for a moment, he believed her, not fully, but enough to feel something shift inside him. The night grew deeper, the air cooler, but neither of them noticed, because something else was growing, something warmer, something real. At some point, their hands brushed lightly. A simple touch, accidental, but neither of them pulled away immediately. Ava felt her breath catch. Ethan's fingers stilled for a second. Then slowly, gently, their hands rested beside each other. Not fully holding, not completely apart, just there, close enough to feel, far enough to hesitate. Is this strange? Ava whispered. Ethan shook his head softly. No. A pause, then he added, it feels right. Ava didn't reply. But she didn't move her hand either. Time passed like that, quiet, soft, unspoken, until finally the moment shifted. I should go, Ava said gently. Ethan nodded, even though something in him wanted to stay. I'll walk you. They walked together again, steps slow, conversation light. But the silence between them said more than words ever could. When they reached her door, they stopped. Closer this time, much closer. Ava looked at him. Ethan held her gaze. Neither of them spoke, because sometimes words are too small for what the heart feels. "Good night," Ava whispered. Ethan's voice was just as soft. "Good night." She turned to leave, but for a brief second she hesitated. As if something was holding her there. As if leaving wasn't as easy as it used to be. Then she stepped inside, and the door closed gently behind her. Ethan stood there for a moment longer, looking at the space she had just been. Feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Something fragile. Something beautiful. Something he didn't want to lose. And as he walked away, one thought stayed with him. Some connections don't ask for attention. They simply grow, until they become impossible to ignore. The days after that night began to feel different in a way neither of them could explain. It was not excitement. It was not confusion. It was something softer, something deeper, like a quiet understanding that had started to take root in their hearts. Ava woke up each morning with a strange calmness inside her. It wasn't happiness in a loud way. It was a steady feeling, like something in her life had finally aligned. She no longer reached for her phone in panic or loneliness. She reached for it with hope. Ethan, on the other hand, found himself smiling at small things again. Things he had stopped noticing long ago: a warm cup of coffee, a quiet morning sky, the sound of wind against his window. But most of all, her messages. They became the rhythm of his day, a comfort he didn't realize he had been missing for years. One afternoon, Ava was sitting by her window when her phone lit up. "Ethan." "Are you busy?" She smiled instantly. "No," a few seconds passed. "Come outside." Ava's heart paused slightly. "Where? Just trust me." She didn't ask again. She simply grabbed her coat and left. Somewhere inside her she knew she didn't need explanations anymore. The city air felt cooler than usual. The streets quieter. It felt like the world was holding its breath for something. When she reached the small park near her street, she saw him. Ethan was standing near the trees, hands in his pockets, looking at the ground as if he was thinking too deeply. Then he looked up, and everything else disappeared again. "You came," he said softly. Ava tilted her head slightly. "You said trust you." A faint smile appeared on his face. "I'm glad you still do." Ava walked closer. "I don't know why I do," she said honestly, "but I do." There was a pause between them, not uncomfortable, just real. Ethan looked away for a second. "I used to think people only stay when they have a reason to." Ava listened quietly. "But now?" she asked. Ethan turned back to her. "Now I think some people stay because they want to understand you, not fix you." Ava felt those words settle deep inside her. For a moment she didn't respond, because something in her chest tightened gently, beautifully. "I like that," she finally said. Ethan nodded slowly. "Me too." They walked together through the park. Leaves moved softly under their feet. The world around them felt far away again. Ava spoke first. "Do you ever feel scared?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Every day." Ava looked at him. "Of what?" He paused. "Of losing things I finally care about." Ava slowed her steps slightly. "And me?" she asked quietly. Ethan looked at her immediately. "You're not something I want to lose." The honesty in his voice made her heart skip. She looked away for a moment, trying to understand the feeling rising inside her. It wasn't fear. It wasn't confusion. It was something dangerously close to love, but neither of them said that word. Not yet. Because some feelings grow in silence before they find language. They sat on a wooden bench as the evening slowly arrived. The sky turned softer shades of orange and purple. Ava leaned slightly back, looking up. "It feels like life is finally slowing down," she said. Ethan nodded. "Or maybe we are finally noticing it." Ava smiled faintly. "Maybe both." A comfortable silence followed. Then Ethan spoke again. "Can I ask you something?" Ava turned toward him. "Anything." He hesitated for a second. "If I had met you earlier, do you think things would have been different?" Ava thought carefully. "I don't think timing changes people," she said softly. "It just reveals them at the right moment." Ethan looked at her. "And what does this moment reveal?" Ava met his eyes. "That we needed this now?" The wind passed gently between them, and for the first time Ethan didn't feel like he was chasing something broken inside himself. He felt like he was standing beside something whole, something real. When the sky darkened, they walked back slowly. Their steps were not rushed. Their words were few, but their presence spoke enough. At her door they stopped again, the same place but not the same feeling. It had deepened, grown, changed. Ava looked at him, Ethan looked back. Neither of them wanted to end the moment, but they both knew it had to pause. "Good night," Ava said softly. Ethan nodded. "Good night." A brief silence followed. Then Ava spoke again, even softer this time. "Will you be here tomorrow?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes." A small smile appeared on her face. "Okay." She turned and went inside. This time the door didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a continuation. Ethan stood there for a while, watching the closed door. And for the first time, he didn't feel uncertain about what he was becoming, because something inside him had already begun to change. Slowly, quietly, and permanently, a story that started in silence was now learning how to speak. The morning after that night carried a different kind of light. It was softer, almost golden, as if the sun itself had learned something new about warmth. Ava woke up earlier than usual, not because she had to, but because her thoughts had already started moving before her eyes even opened. Ethan. That name didn't feel like a stranger in her mind anymore. It felt like a presence that quietly stayed with her, even in silence. She sat on her bed for a moment, holding her phone but not unlocking it immediately. There was no message yet, and still she smiled. Because waiting no longer felt empty, it felt alive. Across the city, Ethan was already awake, too. He stood by his window, watching the streets slowly come alive. People walking, buses moving, life continuing in its usual rhythm. But inside him, something was different. There was a lightness he couldn't explain. A quiet certainty that no matter how uncertain life had been before, something good had entered it now. He picked up his phone, paused, then typed, "Good morning." Ava saw the message within seconds. Her heart responded before her mind. "Good morning," a simple exchange, but it carried everything. "How are you feeling today?" Ethan asked. Ava looked at the question longer than expected. "Calm," she replied. "For the first time in a long time." Ethan read that and leaned back slightly. That one word meant more to him than anything else. "Same," he wrote. There was a pause between messages, not awkward, just peaceful. Then Ava added, "I kept thinking about yesterday." Ethan's fingers stopped for a moment. "So did I." Ava smiled softly at his reply. "Do you think it's strange how easily everything feels with you?" Ethan stared at the screen for a while. "No," he finally replied. "I think strange things are usually the most real ones." Ava's eyes softened. That sentence stayed with her. The day moved forward slowly, but their messages never really stopped. Between work, between routines, between small breaks of life, they kept finding each other again and again, like two people refusing to drift apart. At one point, Ethan sent a message that made Ava pause. "I want to show you something." Ava replied instantly. "What?" "Meet me later." She hesitated for only a moment. "Where?" "A place I used to go when I needed silence." Ava felt something shift inside her. "Okay." Evening arrived with a gentle breeze. Ava reached the location Ethan had sent. It was not a crowded place, not loud, not busy, just a quiet lakeside surrounded by soft trees and fading sunlight. Ethan was already there. Standing near the water, still, calm, waiting, when he turned and saw her, something in his expression softened immediately. "You came," he said. Ava stepped closer. "I said I would." Ethan nodded slightly. "I know." They stood together near the water. The surface reflected the sky like a broken mirror of colors. It was peaceful in a way that didn't need words. Ava looked around. "It's beautiful." Ethan nodded. "It used to be my escape." Ava glanced at him. "Used to be," he paused. "Now I don't need to escape as much." Ava understood without him explaining further. They sat down near the edge, legs slightly stretched forward, watching the water move gently. A comfortable silence settled between them. Then Ava spoke softly. "Do you ever feel like people don't really see you?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Most of my life," he said honestly. Ava turned slightly toward him. "And now," Ethan looked at her. "Now I feel like someone is trying to." Ava didn't respond immediately, because something in her chest tightened again. Not pain, not confusion, something deeper, connection. She looked away toward the water. "I think I understand you more than I expected to," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "That's what scares me a little." Ava looked back at him. "Why?" "Because when something feels this real, you start to fear losing it." Ava stayed silent for a moment. Then she said softly, "Maybe we shouldn't think about losing it yet." Ethan turned slightly toward her. "Then what should we think about?" Ava hesitated. "Keeping it safe." Those words settled between them, like a promise without calling itself one. The wind moved gently. The sky slowly shifted into evening colors, and for a while they just existed beside each other. No rush, no fear, just presence. After some time, Ethan broke the silence. "Can I tell you something?" Ava nodded. "Always." He took a breath. "I used to believe that I was meant to be alone." Ava listened carefully. "I stopped expecting people to stay," he continued, "because every time I cared, it left." Ava's eyes softened. "But you stayed," he added, looking at her. Ava felt that sentence deeply. "I'm here," she said simply. Ethan nodded. "I know." Another pause, then Ava spoke. I think we both stopped believing in something. Ethan looked at her. What? People. Ethan didn't disagree. Ava continued softly. But maybe we were just waiting for the right one to change that. Silence followed again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was healing. The sun dipped lower, touching the horizon. It was time to leave. Neither of them wanted to say it, but both knew. Ava stood first. Ethan followed. They walked slowly back together. The same way they always did, side by side, close enough to feel, far enough to hesitate. At her door again they stopped. The same place, but something had deepened between those visits. Ava looked at him. Today felt different, she said softly. Ethan nodded. It did. A pause, then Ava added quietly, thank you for showing me this place. Ethan shook his head slightly. Thank you for coming. Silence, then the familiar goodbye. Good night, Ava said. Good night, Ethan replied. But this time, neither of them turned away immediately, because some goodbyes stop feeling like endings and start feeling like waiting for the next beginning. That night, neither Ava nor Ethan slept early. It wasn't restlessness in the usual sense. It was something softer, like their hearts were still sitting by that lake, still listening to the water, still trying to hold on to the silence they had shared. Ava lay in bed, staring at the faint light spilling through her curtains. She kept replaying moments from the day, Ethan standing by the water, his voice when he said, "Now I don't need to escape as much." That sentence stayed with her longer than she expected, because it felt honest, and honesty was something she had stopped expecting from people. Her phone rested beside her. She picked it up once, then again, but this time she didn't rush to message him, she just held it, like it somehow connected her to him even without words. Across the city, Ethan was doing the same. He sat on the edge of his bed, elbows resting on his knees, phone in hand. The screen was open to their chat, no new messages yet. And still he smiled, because for once silence didn't feel like distance, it felt like understanding. Finally he typed, "Are you awake?" Ava saw it immediately. "Yes." A pause. Then Ethan added, "I can't stop thinking about today." Ava read that slowly. So can I. There was something comforting about how easily they admitted it. No hesitation, no fear, just truth. Ethan leaned back slightly. "That place, I haven't taken anyone there before." Ava's fingers paused. "Why me?" she asked softly. Ethan stared at the question for a long moment, not because he didn't know the answer, but because the answer felt bigger than words. "I don't know," he finally wrote, "but it didn't feel like a choice." Ava read that sentence more than once. It wasn't romantic in a loud way, it was deeper than that. It felt like recognition, like something already written, slowly unfolding. "I'm glad you showed me," she replied. Ethan's chest felt lighter reading that. For a while neither of them typed anything, but neither of them disconnected either. Just staying there in the quiet together. Finally Ava broke the silence. "Do you ever feel afraid at night?" she asked. Ethan didn't ask what she meant, he understood. "Yes," he replied. Ava waited. "Of what?" she typed. Ethan hesitated for a second before answering. "Of waking up and finding everything back to how it used to be." Ava's heart softened, because she knew that fear too. "I used to feel that," she said. Ethan read it carefully. "Not anymore?" he asked. Ava looked at the ceiling, then slowly typed, "Not when I talk to you." Ethan didn't respond immediately, because something in his chest tightened in a way that felt unfamiliar, not pain, not confusion. Something dangerously close to hope. "Ava," he wrote, "yes, I don't want this to become something we overthink." Ava understood immediately, "Me neither." A pause, then Ethan added, "But I also don't want to pretend it's nothing." Ava's breath slowed. "Then don't," she replied. Silence followed again. But this time it felt heavier, more real, more alive. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, something quietly changed, not spoken, not defined, but felt. The next morning arrived with soft rain. The city looked washed clean, like it had forgotten its noise for a while. Ava stood near her window, watching drops slide down the glass. Her phone buzzed. "Good morning," Ethan wrote. She smiled. "Good morning." "Rainy day," he added. "Yes," she replied. "It feels peaceful." Ethan stared at that word, peaceful, because that was exactly what she was becoming for him, without even trying. "Can I see you today?" he asked. Ava didn't hesitate. "Yes." They met again that evening, not at the lake this time, but at a quiet street cafe with warm yellow lights and the smell of fresh coffee mixing with rain outside. Ethan arrived first. Ava came a few minutes later. When she entered, he looked up immediately, and like always, the world softened. "You made it," he said gently. Ava smiled as she sat down. "I said I would." They ordered simple drinks. But neither of them cared about the menu. They cared about the moment. Outside, rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, everything felt warmer. Ava stirred her cup slowly. You know, she said, I used to think peace was a place. Ethan listened carefully. And now, he asked. Ava looked at him. Now I think it might be a person. Ethan didn't speak for a moment, he just looked at her, as if trying to understand how someone could say something so simple and still mean so much. Ava lowered her gaze slightly. I don't know what we are becoming, she admitted. Ethan replied softly, neither do I. A pause. Then he added, but I know I don't want it to stop. Ava's fingers tightened slightly around her cup. Then it won't, she said quietly. There was no dramatic moment, no declaration, just a shared understanding forming in silence. As the rain continued outside, they talked for hours, about childhood memories, about fears they never shared before, about dreams they stopped believing in. And in every word, something invisible grew stronger, not rushed, not forced. Just real. When it was time to leave, the rain had slowed. They stepped outside together. The street glistened under soft lights. Ava pulled her coat closer. Ethan looked at her. I'll walk you. Ava nodded. They walked slowly through the wet streets, side by side. Again, always at her door they stopped. Ava turned toward him. Today felt different again, she said. Ethan nodded. Every day does now. A small silence followed. Then Ava spoke softly. Ethan, he looked at her. Yes. Ava hesitated for a second, then simply said, thank you for not making this complicated. Ethan smiled faintly. I think we are just not trying to ruin something that feels right. Ava's eyes softened. Good night, she said. Good night, he replied. This time, neither of them felt like they were saying goodbye, only see you again. After the rain, the city felt different, cleaner, quieter, as if even the streets had softened their edges, just like the feelings growing between Ava and Ethan. But change always brings questions with it, and questions begin when silence becomes too meaningful to ignore. Ava sat at her desk the next morning, staring at her phone longer than usual. Their conversations had become constant, natural, almost necessary. But now something inside her felt slightly unsettled. Not fear, not doubt, just awareness. Because feelings that grow slowly also become harder to define. Her phone buzzed. Ethan. Good morning, did you sleep okay? Ava smiled faintly. Yes, you. A pause. Not really, he replied honestly. Ava's expression changed slightly. Why? Another pause. Then because I kept thinking about you. Ava's heart skipped, but not in surprise, in recognition. Because she had been thinking about him too, just differently, more deeply, more constantly. I did too, she finally admitted. The truth between them had started becoming easier than pretending. Ethan read her message and leaned back in his chair. For a moment he stared at the ceiling. This was the part he had always feared, when something starts feeling too real and you don't know what to do with it. He typed slowly. Do you think we're moving too fast? Ava saw the message and paused, not because she didn't understand, but because she had been feeling the same question quietly in her mind. I don't know, she replied honestly. A silence followed. Not empty, heavy, thoughtful, Ethan added, I don't want to lose what we have. Ava's fingers tightened around her phone. Neither do I, she wrote, but then, after a pause, she added something more. Maybe we're just scared because it matters. Ethan read that twice, then again because it was true. What if we ruin it? He asked. Ava looked out the window. Rain from yesterday still clung to the glass in faint streaks. Then it wasn't real, she said. She didn't fully believe it, but she wanted to. Ethan stared at her words for a long time, then slowly typed, or maybe we learn how to protect it. Ava felt something shift inside her. Because that answer didn't push her away, it stayed. That evening they didn't meet immediately. For the first time there was hesitation, not distance, just reflection. But by nightfall, Ethan sent a message. Can we meet? I don't want this feeling in my head without seeing you. Ava read it and exhaled softly. Yes. They met at the same cafe again, but this time the air felt different, not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. Ethan arrived first. Ava came a few minutes later. When she walked in, he noticed something immediately. She wasn't smiling as easily as before, not sad, just careful. You okay? He asked softly as she sat down. Ava nodded slowly. Just thinking too much. Ethan gave a faint smile. Welcome to my world. A small silence followed. Then Ava spoke. Do you think it's possible to care about someone without losing yourself in it? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Because that was exactly what he had been trying to understand too. I think, he said carefully, it depends on whether both people are willing to stay real. Ava listened closely. Real how? Not perfect, he said. Not pretending. Just honest. Ava looked at him. We are honest, she said softly. Ethan nodded. Yes, but honesty also needs balance. Ava understood what he meant. Care without confusion. Love without losing identity. Connection without fear controlling it. Outside, night had started to fall again. Lights flickered on slowly across the street. Inside, their conversation became quieter, deeper, less about feelings, more about understanding them. I don't want to rush into something just because it feels good, Ethan said. Ava nodded slowly. Me neither. Another pause, then she added, but I also don't want to step back from something that feels right. Ethan looked at her, and for the first time that evening his expression softened completely. Then maybe we don't rush, he said gently, and we don't step back. Ava tilted her head slightly. Then what do we do? Ethan smiled faintly. We walk carefully. Ava repeated quietly, carefully, and somehow that word felt enough. Not restrictive, not fearful, just mindful. They finished their drinks slowly. The silence between them now felt different again, not heavy, not uncertain, just aware. When they stepped outside, the air was cool. The street lights reflected on wet pavement again, even though it hadn't rained today. Ava looked at the sky. Everything feels different now, she said. Ethan walked beside her. It's because we started noticing it more, he replied. At her door, they stopped again. But this time, there was no hesitation in standing there, just understanding. Ava looked at him. I'm glad we talked today, she said softly. Ethan nodded. Me too. A pause, then Ava added, even if it felt a little scary. Ethan gave a small smile. That's usually how you know it matters. A quiet moment passed. Then good night, Ava said. Good night, Ethan replied. She turned and went inside, and this time neither of them felt confusion, only awareness, because real connections don't disappear when they become complicated. They just become deeper. The next few days didn't feel the same anymore. Not because something had gone wrong, but because something had started to feel real enough to notice. Ava found herself becoming more thoughtful in between their messages. Every word she sent now carried a weight she hadn't felt before. Not fear, just awareness of what it meant. Ethan, too, felt it. The easy flow they once had now carried pauses, small moments where both of them seemed to be thinking before replying. Not distance, just depth, and depth always changes how people move. One evening, Ethan messaged her. Can we meet today? Ava stared at the message longer than usual, then replied. Yes, but something inside her felt slightly different this time. When they met at the cafe, the atmosphere wasn't heavy, but it wasn't as light as before either. It was real. Ethan was already there when she arrived. He looked up and, as always, his expression softened immediately. But Ava noticed something subtle in his eyes. Thought. You came, he said gently. Ava sat down. I said I would. A small smile, but it didn't last as long as before. There was a pause, not uncomfortable, just waiting. Ethan spoke first. I feel like something has changed. Ava didn't deny it. I feel it too. He nodded slowly, not surprised, just accepting. Outside, the evening light fell across the cafe window, creating long shadows between them. Ethan stirred his coffee without drinking it. I don't want us to become something that confuses us, he said quietly. Ava listened carefully. And what do you think we are becoming? She asked. Ethan looked up at her. Something important, he said honestly. That's why I'm careful. Ava understood that word, careful, because care often carries fear inside it. She took a slow breath. I don't want fear to decide what we are, she said softly. Ethan nodded. Neither do I. Another silence followed, this time longer, deeper. Ava looked down at her hands. I think, she paused, choosing her words carefully, we both got used to this feeling too quickly. Ethan didn't interrupt. He just listened. Ava continued. And now we're scared of losing it. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, because we've never had something like this before. Ava nodded. That's exactly why it feels risky. Outside, people walked past the cafe, unaware of the quiet world unfolding inside. Inside, everything felt paused. Not broken, just suspended. Ethan leaned back slightly. I don't want to hold you in a way that feels heavy for you, he said. Ava immediately shook her head. No, it's not heavy. A pause. It's just new. Ethan studied her expression. New can feel like pressure sometimes. Ava met his gaze. But it can also feel like possibility. That word stayed between them, possibility. Ethan repeated it slowly in his mind. Because that was what this had always been. Not certainty, not promise, just possibility. A soft silence followed. Then Ava spoke again. I don't want us to disappear from each other's lives because we're overthinking this. Ethan nodded. That's not what I want either. A pause. Then he added honestly, but I also don't want to lose myself in something I don't understand fully yet. Ava understood that, more than she wanted to admit. She looked out the window for a moment. The sky had turned darker now. Lights flickered on one by one. I think, she said slowly, we don't have to decide everything right now. Ethan looked at her. What do you mean? Ava turned back. We just stay honest and slow. Ethan considered that, slow, careful, honest, not ending, not defining, just existing. He nodded. Okay. Ava gave a faint, relieved smile. Okay. The tension didn't disappear completely, but it softened, because sometimes understanding doesn't remove complexity, it just makes it easier to carry. When they left the cafe that night, the walk felt different again. Less uncertain than before, but still thoughtful. At her door they stopped. Ethan looked at her. I don't regret anything, he said softly. Ava nodded. Me neither. A pause, then Ethan added, but I think we needed that conversation. Ava smiled slightly. Yeah, we did. A quiet moment passed. Then, good night, Ava said. Good night, Ethan replied. This time the words didn't feel like distance. They felt like balance, and sometimes balance is what keeps fragile things from breaking. After that night, something subtle changed between Ava and Ethan. Not distance, not closeness, but awareness. They still talked every day. They still met. They still cared in the same way they always had. But now there was a quiet understanding sitting between their words. Like both of them had learned that some feelings are not just meant to be felt, but also handled gently. Ava noticed it first in herself. She no longer rushed to reply, not because she didn't care, but because she was learning how to feel without losing balance. Ethan noticed it too. He found himself thinking more before speaking, not out of fear, but out of respect for what they were becoming. One evening, Ethan sent a message. Are you free tonight? Ava looked at the screen for a moment before replying. Yes. But this time there was a slight hesitation in her heart, not doubt. Just reflection. They met at a quiet place near the edge of the city. Not the cafe, not the lake. Somewhere in between. A small open bridge where the wind moved freely and the city lights shimmered below like scattered thoughts. Ethan was already there. Ava joined him slowly. Neither of them smiled immediately, not because something was wrong, but because something felt serious. You came, Ethan said softly. Ava nodded. I always do. A pause. Then Ethan looked at the view ahead. I've been thinking, he said. Ava turned slightly toward him. About us? She asked gently. Ethan didn't deny it. Yes. A silence followed, not heavy, just honest. Ava leaned lightly on the railing. I've been thinking too, she admitted. Ethan glanced at her. And, Ava took a breath, I think we've reached a point where this is no longer just casual feelings. Ethan listened carefully. Ava continued. It's becoming something that needs understanding. Ethan nodded slowly. That's exactly what I feel too. A soft wind passed between them. A moment of shared recognition, not confusion, not fear, just truth. Ethan spoke again. I don't want this to become something that hurts either of us later. Ava looked at him. Then we don't let it become something rushed, she said softly. Ethan studied her face. And if it becomes something deeper? Ava didn't answer immediately, because she had felt that question too. Deep down, she finally said, then we handle it when it comes, not before. Ethan exhaled slowly. That sounds fair. A small silence followed. Then Ava added quietly, but I also don't want us to keep holding back what we feel. Ethan turned toward her. I'm not holding back, he said honestly. I just don't want to lose clarity. Ava nodded. I understand. A pause, then she looked at him more directly. Ethan, do you trust this? He looked at her for a long time, the city lights reflected in his eyes. Then he said softly, I trust you. Ava felt something tighten gently in her chest. Not pressure, not fear, something warmer. She whispered, that's not the same answer. Ethan smiled faintly. I know. A silence followed again. Then he added, but it's the most honest one I have right now. Ava accepted that, because honesty, even when incomplete, still mattered. They stood there for a while, not speaking, just watching the city breathe beneath them. Eventually, Ava spoke. I think we should take this slowly but not distance ourselves. Ethan nodded immediately. Yes, a pause. No running away, he added. Ava smiled slightly. No running away. That agreement felt small but powerful, because it wasn't about defining what they were. It was about promising how they would treat it, with care, with patience, with honesty. As they walked back through the quiet streets, the air felt lighter again. Not carefree, but stable. At her door, they stopped. The same place, but a different feeling now rested between them. Ava looked at him. We're okay, she asked softly. Ethan nodded. We're okay. A pause, then he added, we're just learning. Ava smiled faintly. Yeah, learning. A quiet moment passed, then good night, she said. Good night, Ethan replied, and this time there was no confusion in their hearts. Only understanding. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive as certainty. It arrives as something you slowly learn how to hold. After that night on the bridge, something settled between Ava and Ethan. Not distance, not separation, but a quiet maturity in the way they looked at each other now. They had stopped rushing toward meaning, and started learning how to simply exist within it. Days passed in a gentle rhythm. Their messages continued, but they no longer filled every empty moment. Instead, they became something more intentional, more thoughtful. Good morning. Are you okay? Thinking of you. Simple words carrying deeper weight. Ava found herself changing in ways she didn't fully notice at first. She laughed more easily with others again. She focused better on her work. She started sleeping without overthinking every silence. But at the same time, Ethan was always there in the background of her thoughts, not as confusion anymore, but as presence. Ethan, too, felt something shift inside him. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't building his entire emotional world around one person. He was learning balance, but Ava still mattered, more than he could easily explain. One evening, he sent her a message. "Can we meet?" Ava replied after a short pause. "Yes." But this time, she didn't feel the same urgency as before. It was calm, natural, like meeting someone who was already part of her life, not someone she was chasing. They met at a familiar place, the lake, the same place where something between them had quietly begun to feel real. Ethan was already sitting near the water when Ava arrived. He turned as she approached, and smiled, not wide, not emotional. "Just steady." "You came," he said softly. Ava sat beside him. "I always do," she replied. A comfortable silence followed. The water moved gently in front of them. The sky reflected soft shades of evening again. But this time nothing felt uncertain, just reflective. Ethan spoke first. "I think we've changed," he said. Ava nodded slowly. "We have." A pause, then Ethan added, "but in a good way." Ava looked at him. "Yes, I think so too." There was no tension in his voice now, no fear, just clarity. Ethan leaned back slightly. "I used to think love was supposed to feel intense all the time," he said quietly. Ava listened carefully. "And now?" she asked. Ethan smiled faintly. "Now I think love might also be peace." Ava looked at him for a moment, then softly said, "I think I understand that now." A gentle silence followed, not empty, just full of understanding. Ava spoke again. "Do you ever feel like we almost lost this by overthinking it?" Ethan nodded slightly. "Maybe," he admitted, "but I also think we saved it by not ignoring the questions." Ava considered that, then nodded. "Yeah, we didn't run from them." Ethan looked at her. "And you didn't run from me either." Ava met his gaze. "I think I stopped wanting to." That sentence hung in the air for a moment, simple but deep. Ethan didn't respond immediately, because something inside him softened, not dramatically, just quietly, like a door that had finally stopped closing. The sun began to set fully now, the sky turning into deep orange and soft purple. Ava hugged her arms lightly. "It feels different here now," she said. Ethan nodded. "Because we're different here now." Ava smiled slightly. "Maybe we were always supposed to end up here." Ethan looked at her. "Or maybe we just finally learned how to stay." A silence followed, comfortable, warm, real. Ava stood slowly. "I should go," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "Yeah." But neither of them moved immediately. Because some moments don't want to end. They just pause. Finally, Ethan stood too. They walked back together as usual, but something in their steps felt lighter. Not excitement, not confusion, just acceptance. At her door, they stopped. Ava looked at him. There was something calmer in her eyes now. "I think I understand us better now," she said. Ethan nodded. "Me too." A pause, then Ava added softly, "Thank you for not turning this into something we couldn't handle." Ethan shook his head slightly. "No," he said. "Thank you for staying honest through it." A small silence. "Then good night," Ava said. "Good night," Ethan replied. She turned to go inside, but this time there was no hesitation, only peace. And Ethan stood there for a moment longer, not missing her, but feeling grateful that she existed in his story at all. Because some connections don't burn loudly, they settle quietly, and become part of who you are.